Stephen Paul Smith was born at the Methodist Hospital in Omaha, Nebraska on August 6, 1969. Stephen was the only child of Gary Smith and Bunny K. Berryman. Gary was a student at the University of Nebraska Medical Center, and Bunny K. was an elementary school music teacher. When Stephen was 6 months old, Gary and Bunny K. divorced, and Stephen moved with his mother to Duncanville, Texas. And things didn't get easier for him as time went on. Stephen endured a very difficult childhood, specifically due to a bad relationship with his stepfather, Charlie Welch. Stephen later said that Charlie abused him at a young age, an accusation Charlie Welch vehemently denied. In the 2004 interview, Jennifer Chiba, Smith's partner at the time of his death, said that Smith's difficult childhood was partly why he needed to sedate himself with drugs as an adult. He was remembering traumatic things from his childhood. Parts of things, it's not my place to say what. At age 9, Stephen would begin playing the piano, and at 10, began learning guitar. There was a family lineage in music, with many people on his mother's side of the family being musicians. His grandfather was a Dixieland drummer, his grandmother sang in a glee club, and his mother was a music teacher. At 10 years old, he actually composed an original piano piece named Fantasy, which won him a prize at a local arts festival and would give him the confidence to continue his passion in music. At 14, Stephen had enough of the abuse at home and decided to move from Texas to Portland, Oregon, to live with his father. Smith later had a tattoo of a map of Texas drawn on his upper arm and said, "I didn't get it because I like Texas, kind of the opposite, but I won't forget about it, although I'm tempted to because I don't like it there." Around this time of his life, Stephen began using drugs, including alcohol, casually with his friends. Stephen would continue to play piano and guitar throughout high school and would also learn how to play the clarinet. He would graduate from Lincoln High School in Portland, Oregon as a National Merit Scholar. After graduating high school, Stephen began calling himself Elliott. He reportedly thought that Stephen sounded too much like a jock name. According to friends, he also used the pseudonym Elliott Stillwater Rotter during his time in the band A Murder of Crows in high school. Biographer S.R. Schutt speculates that the name was either inspired by Elliott Avenue, a street that Smith had lived on in Portland, or that it was suggested by a girlfriend at the time. A junior high acquaintance of Smith speculates Smith changed his name as to not be confused with Steve Smith, the drummer from Journey. After playing in the rock band Heat Miser for several years, Elliott began his solo career in 1994. Elliott rose to mainstream prominence when his song Miss Misery, included in the soundtrack for the film Good Will Hunting, was nominated for an Oscar in the Best Original Song category in 1998. Elliott was a heavy drinker and drug user at times throughout his life, and was diagnosed with ADHD and depression. His struggles with drugs and mental illness affected his life and work. In 2000, around the time he began recording his final album, Smith began to display signs of paranoia, often believing that a white van followed him wherever he was going. He would have friends drop him off for recording sessions almost a mile away from the studio, and to reach the location, he would trudge through hundreds of yards of brush and cliffs. He started telling people that DreamWorks was out to get him. Not long ago, my house was broken into and songs were stolen off my computer, which have wound up in the hands of certain people who work at a certain label. I've also been followed around for months at a time. I wouldn't even want to necessarily say it's the people from that label who were following me around, but it was probably them who broke into my house. Sometime in 2001, he began recording a new album with only himself and John Bryan as producers. The pair had recorded a substantial amount of music for the album when Bryan stopped the sessions because of Smith's continued struggles with substance abuse. Their friendship promptly ended, and Elliott scrapped all the work up to that point. He later said, "There was even a little more than half of a record done before this new one that I just scrapped because of a blown relationship with someone that made me so depressed I didn't want to hear any of those songs. He was just helping me record the songs and stuff, and then the friendship kind of fell apart all of a sudden one day. It just made it kind of awkward being alone in the car listening to the songs." DreamWorks executives Lenny Waronker and Luke Wood scheduled a meeting with Elliott to determine what went wrong with their recording sessions. Elliott complained of an intrusion upon his personal life from the label, as well as poor promotion for his last album. The talks proved fruitless, and soon after, Elliott sent a message to the executives stating that if they did not release him from his contract, he would commit suicide. In May 2001, Smith set out to re-record the album, mostly on his own, but with some help from David McConnell of Golden Boy. McConnell told Spin that during the time, Elliott would smoke over $1,500 worth of heroin and crack per day, and would often talk to him about suicide, and on numerous occasions tried to actually give himself overdoses. Elliott's live performances during 2001 and 2002 were few and far between. The performances he did have were close to home and mainly took place in the Pacific Northwest or LA. The reasons why were made obvious to everybody. On December 20th, 2001, Elliott had a show at Portland's Crystal Ballroom. A review written in a local paper of the show expressed concern over his appearance and performance. His hair was uncharacteristically greasy and long, his face was bearded and gaunt, and during his songs he exhibited alarming signs of memory loss and butterfingers. At another performance in San Francisco that month, the audience reportedly began shouting out lyrics when Elliott could not remember them himself. In the first of only 3 concerts performed in 2002, Elliott co-headlined Northwestern University's A&O Ball with Wilco on May 2nd in Chicago. While he was on stage for nearly an hour, he failed to complete half of the songs he started. He claimed that his poor performance was due to his left hand having fallen asleep, and told the audience it felt like having stuff on your hand and you can't get it off. Smith's performance was reviewed as undoubtedly one of the worst performances ever by a musician, and an excruciating nightmare. A reporter for the online magazine Glorious Noise wrote, "It would not surprise me at all if Elliott Smith ends up dead within a year." On November 25th, 2002, Elliott was involved in a brawl with the LAPD at a concert where the Flaming Lips and Beck were performing. The officers allegedly beat and arrested him and his girlfriend, Jennifer Chiba. 2 spent the night in jail, and Elliott's back was injured in the incident. This caused him to cancel a number of his shows. Wayne Coyne, lead singer of the Flaming Lips and a friend of Elliott's, stated concern over Elliott's appearance and his actions that night, saying that he saw a guy who lost control of himself. He was needy, he was grumpy, he was everything you wouldn't want in a person. It's not like when you think of Keith Richards being pleasantly blissed out in the corner. On October 21st, 2003, Elliott Smith was at his Lemoyne Street home in Echo Park, California, where he lived with his girlfriend, Jennifer Chiba. According to Chiba, the two were arguing and she locked herself in the bathroom to take a shower. Chiba heard him scream and upon opening the door saw Elliott standing with a knife in his chest. She pulled the knife out, after which he collapsed, and she called 911 at 12:18 p.m. that day. Elliott died in the hospital, with the time of death listed as 1:36 p.m. An alleged suicide note written on a sticky note read, "I'm so sorry. Love, Elliott. God forgive me." Elliott Smith was 34 years old. While Elliott's death was reported as a suicide, the official autopsy report released in December 2003 left open the question of homicide. The coroner reported that no traces of illegal substances or alcohol were found in Elliott's system at the time of his death, but did find his prescribed levels of antidepressants, ADHD medications, including clonazepam, mirtazapine, tamoxetine, and amphetamine. There were no hesitation wounds, which are typically found on a victim of suicide by self-infliction. Due to the inconclusive autopsy ruling, the LAPD investigation remains open to this day, with the possibility of Elliott's death being a homicide and not a suicide. Unfortunately, since Elliott Smith's remains were cremated, there can be no exhumation of the body, and the police have to rely on what evidence they currently have or may receive in the future. According to Pitchfork, record producer Larry Crane reported that he had planned to help Elliott mix his album in mid-November. Crane wrote, "I hadn't talked to Elliott in over a year. His girlfriend Jennifer called me last week and asked if I'd like to come to LA to help mix and finish Elliott's album. I said yes, of course, and chatted with Elliott for the first time in ages. It seemed surreal that he would call me to finish an album and then a week later kill himself." To this day, Elliott Smith's death remains unsolved.